Imagine this, you've spent so much time being nice. You've tried to understand, you've tried to compromise, and yet every time you give a little, they take a lot. It's like trying to fill a bottomless pit where nothing ever seems to be enough. You give them your time, your energy, your emotions, everything you have, and what do you get in return? Nothing. Worse, manipulation, control, gaslighting. It's like you're drowning in their need for attention, for validation, for more. So let me ask you this. Why the hell are you still trying to please them? Narcissism is one of those terms we throw around casually, but it's crucial to understand it deeply. We often think of narcissists as people who simply love themselves, but it's much more than that. At its core, narcissism is an excessive focus on oneself, an inflated sense of self-importance, and a constant need for validation. These individuals believe they are special, superior to others, and entitled to special treatment. They crave admiration and have little to no regard for others' feelings. In fact, empathy is often something they lack entirely. And while many of us have heard of narcissists, we don't always grasp how their behaviors manifest and how they impact those around them. Now let's look at a common misconception that's both widespread and incredibly damaging. The idea that being nice or accommodating will somehow change a narcissist. We've all been there, right? You try to appease them, stay kind, maybe even give in to their demands, hoping that your efforts will help them see things from your perspective. But here's the catch. It doesn't work. You see, a narcissist isn't looking for kindness. They're looking for control. They thrive on validation, but not in the way most of us do. They don't want to feel heard or understood. They want to feel powerful, superior, and untouchable. Your kindness doesn't make them self-aware or compassionate. Instead, it feeds into their narrative of entitlement. The more you give, the more they take, and the less likely they are to change. Think about it this way. Imagine you're feeding a fire. The fire might seem to calm down for a moment when you throw in a little more fuel, but eventually it will grow bigger, more out of control, and more demanding. Narcissists are the same way. The more you give them your attention, the more you cater to their desires, the more insatiable they become. Your niceness doesn't get them to reflect on their behavior, nor does it inspire any change in their character. Instead, it reinforces their belief that they are entitled to get what they want from others without having to put in any real effort. And let's talk about the internal cost. We might feel like we're being the bigger person by continuing to offer our kindness and patience. But what happens to us? Over time, the emotional toll of constantly trying to please or appease a narcissist can be draining. We can become emotionally exhausted, even though we're acting out of good intentions. We might even begin to lose our sense of self-worth because we're constantly giving and receiving nothing in return. The narcissist, on the other hand, is untouched by this. They remain firmly entrenched in their self-centered worldview, believing they deserve everything they're taking and more. This is where the real problem lies. Narcissists are rarely, if ever, interested in changing. They don't think they need to change. Their worldview is skewed toward the idea that the world exists to serve them. And your kindness only reinforces this illusion. You might believe that being nice will soften their behavior, but unfortunately, that's not the reality. They aren't looking for your understanding or empathy. They are looking for admiration, for control, and for affirmation that they are the most important person in any room. But what if I told you that there's something that can make a narcissist stop and reconsider their actions? What if I told you that kindness is actually the least effective tool in your arsenal? I'm sure many of you are thinking, but surely if I just keep being kind, I can make them see the light. Well, what if I told you there's something more powerful than niceness that could actually help? And what if this method could be the key to creating boundaries, respecting your own needs, and potentially even making a narcissist reconsider their behavior? The answer might surprise you, and it's coming up next. So, as we leave the idea of kindness behind, let me ask you this. What do you think could really shift a narcissist's behavior in a way that kindness never will? Kindness, empathy, and understanding are values we all hold dear. We believe that when we treat others with respect and compassion, we can help them become better people. This is especially true when we encounter individuals who seem to need a little extra support, right? But here's where the problem with narcissism lies. Kindness, as virtuous as it is, won't change a narcissist. In fact, it can actually make the situation worse. You might find yourself thinking, well, surely if I just keep being kind, patient, and understanding, I can break through their tough exterior and reach the real person inside. But the truth is, narcissists don't operate by the same emotional rules that the rest of us do. The more kindness you show them, the more they see it as an opportunity to assert control, to feed their egos, and to maintain the power dynamic. They're not interested in your care or your empathy. They're interested in your attention, your admiration, and most importantly, your compliance. Think of a narcissist like a person who is addicted to attention. Their craving for validation is unending, and kindness often gives them just what they need to continue their toxic behaviors. You might compliment them, listen attentively to their stories, or go out of your way to make them feel special. What happens next? They take that kindness and turn it into ammunition to manipulate you. The cycle continues, and your kindness only fuels their belief that they deserve to be treated as the center of the universe, while their actions toward you remain unchanged, or even more demanding. It's like feeding a beast that's never satisfied, no matter how much you give it. Every time you offer kindness, you're giving them more food for their self-centered mentality. You're not teaching them to be better or to see the world through a more empathetic lens. You're reinforcing their belief that their needs and desires come first, and that they don't need to change a thing about themselves. And what about you in this scenario? You end up emotionally drained, frustrated, and even resentful. You thought your kindness would spark growth in them, but instead, you've only further entrenched their entitled behavior. You're caught in a loop where the harder you try to be nice, the further you drift away from any meaningful connection or change. But don't worry, you're not alone in this. It's a common misstep that many of us make when we first encounter narcissistic individuals. We believe that if we just show enough empathy, enough understanding, enough patience, something will click and they will finally get it. But here's the harsh reality. Narcissists aren't wired that way. They don't crave understanding. They crave admiration. They don't need your sympathy. They need control. And when you're constantly being nice, you're offering them exactly what they want, without ever touching the deeper, more significant aspects of their behavior. So, what's the alternative? If being kind doesn't work, and if empathy doesn't lead to change, what can we do to actually challenge the narcissist's behavior? What kind of approach can we take that will shift the dynamic and prevent us from continuously sacrificing our own well-being? The answer might not be what you expect, but it's a powerful tool that doesn't involve appeasing or coddling. But before I reveal what this is, let's take a moment to consider something critical. Have you ever tried to set a boundary with a narcissist? Did you notice what happened next? I promise you the answer will give you a clue as to what actually works. Because once you understand this principle, you'll start to see how your actions can make a real impact without losing yourself in the process. So, before we dive into the key to shifting a narcissist's behavior, ask yourself this. What do you think is the one thing that can make a narcissist finally realize that their control and manipulation aren't working? Keep that in mind, because the next step is coming, and it might just change everything you thought you knew about dealing with narcissism. It's hard to underestimate the power of boundaries. Think about it for a moment. We all set boundaries in our lives to protect our time, energy, and emotional health, whether in relationships, at work, or even within our own families. But when it comes to dealing with narcissists, boundaries become even more critical. Without them, you might as well be leaving your door wide open for them to walk in, take whatever they want, and leave you drained, frustrated, and wondering how things got so out of control. One of the most important things to realize about narcissists is that they have an uncanny ability to overstep boundaries, sometimes without even realizing it. Or worse, they know exactly what they're doing, but they don't care. In their minds, they are entitled to your time, your energy, and even your emotional resources. And what's more dangerous is that their sense of entitlement is so deeply ingrained, they won't hesitate to push against any limits you try to establish. At first, it may seem like they're just being a little demanding, but soon enough, you'll realize that without clear boundaries, they will take more and more, until you've given everything you have and they're still asking for more. When you don't set boundaries, you inadvertently send a message that your needs don't matter as much as theirs. You tell them, either consciously or unconsciously, that it's okay for them to cross the line. And that's exactly what they'll do. Over time, this can leave you feeling unheard, unappreciated, and even exploited. A narcissist will never stop pushing boundaries unless you make it clear that you won't tolerate their behavior anymore. This is where the power of clear, firm boundaries comes in. So how do you set these boundaries? It's not just about saying no in a moment of frustration. It's about being consistent, assertive, and unwavering. Narcissists will test you, pushing to see how far they can go, But the key to managing them is to remain resolute. When you allow them to cross your boundaries even once, they will see it as a green light to continue testing the waters. But if you draw that line in the sand and refuse to move, they start to realize that there are consequences to their actions. Setting boundaries with a narcissist is not about being rude or disrespectful. It's about taking care of yourself. It's about saying, my needs matter just as much as yours. And when you establish these boundaries, you take the first step toward protecting your emotional well-being. This could mean saying no when they ask for something you simply can't give, or it could involve limiting your interaction with them when they're being manipulative or controlling. It's about standing firm and not feeling guilty for doing so, and being ruthless about it. But here's the twist. A narcissist isn't going to accept your boundaries gracefully. They might try to guilt trip you, accuse you of being selfish, or even manipulate you into thinking you're being unreasonable. They'll use every trick in the book to make you second guess yourself. But don't be fooled. This is exactly what they want. For you to cave, for you to back down, for you to give in to their emotional demands. And this is where you have to get serious about protecting yourself. Because the more you enforce your boundaries, the more you'll see them begin to change, but not in the way you might expect. The narcissist may push back hard at first, but if you stay consistent and unyielding, they'll start to get the message. It might take time, but they will eventually realize that they cannot manipulate you in the same ways they used to. And over time, you'll start to regain a sense of control over your life, your emotions, and your energy. It won't be easy, and it won't be instantaneous, but the more you assert these boundaries, the more you'll begin to see a shift. You'll start to realize that you don't have to be nice, and you don't have to give in just to keep the peace. But here's the catch. Boundaries alone aren't always enough. As important as they are, they're just one piece of the puzzle. There's a deeper layer to this process that goes beyond simply setting limits, and it's something that many people overlook when they try to handle narcissists. So, what's the next step? What's the one thing that, when combined with boundaries, will actually start to shift the narcissist's behavior in a way that niceness never could? You might be surprised, but I'll reveal this critical element shortly. Trust me, once you understand this, you'll have a much clearer path toward reclaiming your peace and breaking free from their grip. Stay with me, because what comes next is a game changer. When it comes to dealing with narcissists, the idea of offering consequences might sound a little harsh at first, but let's break it down and understand why it's so effective. You've probably heard people say, you should treat people how you want to be treated, or if you're kind, people will treat you the same way in return. These are great principles for dealing with most people, but unfortunately, they don't apply to narcissists. They don't respond to kindness in the same way, and they certainly don't learn from emotional feedback like the rest of us. Instead, they only seem to react when there are tangible consequences for their actions. Narcissists thrive on attention, good or bad, and they don't care what form it comes in. They just want to be the center of the universe, whether it's through praise, admiration, or even conflict. So, when you're constantly trying to please them or appease them, you're inadvertently feeding into their need for power and validation. But the real game changer comes when you start shifting the dynamic. Instead of trying to win their favor through kindness, it's time to start offering something much more powerful: consequences. Let's put this in perspective with an example. Imagine you're dealing with a narcissist who constantly cancels plans at the last minute without a valid reason. The usual response from a kind, empathetic person might be to let it slide, to excuse their behavior, and try again. Maybe the next time the narcissist will show up. Maybe they'll be more thoughtful, right? Unfortunately, that's rarely the case. They'll keep doing it because they know they can get away with it. They don't have the empathy or self-awareness to understand the emotional toll they're causing, and they won't change their behavior unless it starts to cost them something concrete. That's where the power of consequences comes in. If you let them know without hesitation that their actions have consequences, whether that's not making future plans with them, taking a step back from the relationship, or even limiting your emotional investment, they start to understand that their behavior isn't acceptable. The key here is consistency. When you repeatedly follow through on the consequences you've set, they begin to see that you're not just playing games. You mean what you say. Here's the catch. Narcissists thrive on control, and one of the best ways to challenge that control is by taking it away. When you stop indulging their whims and set firm boundaries with meaningful consequences, you take away their power over you. It's not about being punitive or vengeful. It's about respecting your own needs and not allowing their toxic behavior to disrupt your life anymore. Think of it like a business transaction. If they want something from you, they need to earn it, not manipulate it from you. By offering consequences instead of concessions, you start to teach them that their behavior isn't something they can simply demand. You might wonder, but what if they don't like the consequences? What if they get angry or retaliate? And that's the thing. Narcissists are used to getting their way, and when they don't, their initial reaction might be anger or frustration, but over time, they'll begin to realize that you're not a pushover anymore. When they understand that their actions come with a cost, whether that's emotional distance, a lack of attention, or even the dissolution of a relationship, they'll start to adjust their behavior. It's not about making them pay for what they've done. It's about teaching them that there's a limit to what they can demand from others. This shift can feel empowering for you. For the first time, you're in control. You're not reacting to their manipulation. You're making sure that your needs are met and that your emotional health is prioritized. Offering consequences is a direct and honest way to communicate with a narcissist, showing them that their toxic behavior won't be tolerated and that you're unwilling to sacrifice your well-being for the sake of their ego. But here's the thing. Consequences alone don't always do the trick. While they're a vital tool in shifting the dynamic, they need to be coupled with something else that truly challenges the narcissist's perception of themselves. There's one final element that can help break through the narcissist's defenses and get them to reassess their behavior in a way that kindness, boundaries, and consequences can't on their own. What's the next step? What could be the final piece to the puzzle that truly shifts the balance of power in a relationship with a narcissist? The answer is coming. And I promise you, it's going to change everything you thought you knew about dealing with this type of behavior. Stick with me, because what comes next could completely change the way you approach relationships, not just with narcissists, but with everyone in your life. When it comes to dealing with narcissists, one of the most crucial steps in protecting your emotional well-being is learning the art of emotional detachment. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, especially when we're taught to be emotionally available, compassionate, and connected in our relationships. But here's the thing. Narcissists are emotional manipulators. They thrive on your reactions, whether those reactions are positive or negative. And if you're emotionally invested, it gives them exactly what they want: control. They can trigger your feelings, your empathy, and your sense of fairness, keeping you tangled in their web of manipulation. Emotional detachment, then, isn't about not caring. It's about protecting yourself from being used as a tool for their emotional game. Think about how a narcissist works. They don't communicate like most people do. They're not interested in a healthy exchange of ideas or a balanced relationship. Instead, they use your emotions as currency. If they can provoke you into reacting emotionally, whether it's anger, guilt, frustration, or even sadness, they've won. You might think you're having an honest conversation with them, but in reality, they're using your emotional investment as a way to manipulate the situation in their favor. They might guilt trip you, use your vulnerabilities against you, or escalate a small disagreement into something much larger. All the while, they're not really interested in resolving the issue. They're simply trying to feed their need for validation, dominance, and emotional control. So, why does emotional detachment work? When you stop reacting emotionally, you take away their power. You become a rock, solid, unaffected, and grounded in your own reality. Narcissists don't know how to handle this. They don't know what to do with someone who isn't feeding into their need for attention or emotional drama. You stop being a puppet on their strings, and suddenly the dynamic shifts. Instead of them pulling you into their emotional chaos, you can observe their behavior from a distance and protect yourself from being swept away. This doesn't mean you shut down completely or become cold and distant. It means you choose to stay calm, centered, and grounded no matter what the narcissist does. It means you refuse to let their emotional manipulation dictate your response. For example, if they try to guilt trip you into doing something you don't want to do, instead of feeling guilty or giving in, you calmly assert your boundaries and maintain your composure. Instead of getting caught up in their drama, you choose to step back and assess the situation logically. By doing so, you remove yourself from the emotional tug-of-war they're trying to create. One of the hardest parts of emotional detachment is learning how to not let their words or actions hurt you. Narcissists often resort to cruel or hurtful comments to get a reaction, but when you're emotionally detached, those comments lose their power. When you stop internalizing their attacks and see them for what they really are, manipulative tactics to provoke a reaction, You start to realize that you don't have to take it personally. Their behavior isn't about you. It's about their own insecurities and need for control. And when you detach emotionally, you gain the space to see this for what it truly is. But here's the trick. Emotional detachment isn't easy. It takes time, practice, and a lot of self-awareness. It requires you to really understand what you're dealing with when you're faced with a narcissist's behavior. And let's face it, it's difficult to stay calm when you're being pushed to your limits. It's not about ignoring your feelings or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about choosing to respond from a place of strength and clarity, rather than being swept away by the emotional turmoil they try to create. This is where most people falter. They think that if they react, if they show how hurt they are or how upset they feel, they will make the narcissist understand. But that's exactly what the narcissist wants. They want to control your emotions. So when you withhold that emotional response and instead stay calm, you take away the narcissist's power. And that's when the real transformation begins. But emotional detachment isn't the end-all, be-all solution. It's a powerful tool, but it needs to be coupled with something more to really shift the dynamic and make a lasting impact on the narcissist's behavior. So you might be wondering, what is that something more? What is the missing piece that will finally break through the narcissist's defenses and get them to reassess their behavior in a way that detachment alone cannot? Trust me, what's coming next is something that could completely change the way you handle narcissists forever. Stay with me, because the final piece of the puzzle is about to be revealed, and it might just be the most powerful strategy of all. By now, you've probably noticed a pattern. Kindness, empathy, and being overly accommodating won't change a narcissist. Boundaries are crucial, and emotional detachment can be a game changer in maintaining your peace. But there's one last incredibly powerful tool that can truly shift the dynamic in your relationship with a narcissist: the art of walking away. Now, this might sound like a simple solution, almost too easy to be effective. After all, why does walking away have such power over someone who seems so fixated on getting their way? The answer lies in the narcissist's need for control, validation, and admiration. When they encounter someone who refuses to be manipulated or controlled, someone who isn't afraid to walk away, it shakes their very foundation. Narcissists are accustomed to people bending to their will. They thrive on getting the attention and admiration they believe they're entitled to, and they expect people to stay invested in them no matter how toxic their behavior may be. But when you walk away, when you refuse to engage with their manipulation, you send a message that cannot be ignored. Walking away isn't just about physically leaving a situation. It's a powerful psychological shift. It's about mentally and emotionally detaching from the drama and manipulative behavior. Narcissists often depend on others to fuel their sense of importance, to be the audience to their emotional theatrics, or to play into their narrative of superiority. And when you step out of that role, when you refuse to play along, it disrupts their entire game. It shows them that their antics won't affect you. It shows them that you are no longer invested in their drama, no longer willing to put up with their toxic behavior. It's a rejection of the idea that they have the right to control your emotions, time, or attention. But here's the thing. Walking away doesn't just affect the narcissist. It impacts you as well. When you choose to walk away from a narcissistic relationship or situation, you are reclaiming your power. You're recognizing your worth, your needs, and your right to a peaceful, respectful life. Narcissists can only manipulate you if you allow them to. When you take a step back, you stop allowing them to dictate the terms of the relationship. You refuse to remain a pawn in their emotional chess game. And when you consistently walk away from their attempts to control or manipulate you, they begin to realize that their tactics no longer work. However, walking away doesn't mean cutting them off entirely, at least not immediately. It's about creating a space where you can assess the situation and regain your clarity and strength. It's about recognizing when you've been caught up in a toxic dynamic and stepping outside of it to get a fresh perspective. When you leave, even momentarily, you give yourself the breathing room you need to make clearer decisions. You create the space to think through what's best for you, not based on their demands, but based on your own needs and values. And most importantly, you show them that their behavior has consequences, real consequences. Now, there's a deeper layer to this that often goes unnoticed. Walking away also communicates self-respect. You show the narcissist, and more importantly yourself, that you will not tolerate mistreatment. You are worthy of respect and love. And when those things aren't being offered, you will not stick around to be mistreated. This act of walking away, whether it's from an argument, a toxic interaction, or even a full-fledged relationship, signals that you value your own peace and happiness over their approval. And that in itself is a radical act of self-love. But let's be clear, walking away is not about avoiding conflict or hiding from the problem. It's about recognizing that some battles aren't worth fighting, especially when the other person isn't willing to engage in a healthy, respectful way. It's about setting the stage for a future where you are in control of your own emotional landscape, where you are no longer swayed by someone else's need to control or dominate. Now, here's the kicker. While walking away can disrupt a narcissist's sense of control, it's not always enough on its own. The narcissist might fight to bring you back into their orbit, might try to draw you back with charm, promises, or guilt. And when this happens, the real question is, are you ready to maintain that distance, to keep walking away each time they try to pull you back into their manipulation? Because that is where the real power lies, knowing that the ability to walk away isn't just a one-time solution. It's a tool you can keep using over and over to protect your peace and regain your strength. In the end, the journey of breaking free from a narcissist's grip isn't easy. And it certainly isn't about one simple solution. It's about setting boundaries, detaching emotionally, offering consequences, and perhaps most importantly, knowing when it's time to walk away. This process may take time and may involve many steps, but when you start practicing these tools, you'll begin to see the shift. And when you do, you'll realize something profound. You no longer need to change the narcissist, because in the end, the only person you need to change is you. You need to change your approach, your mindset, and your willingness to accept behavior that doesn't serve your happiness. And while all of these strategies are powerful, there's one final truth you need to understand about narcissism. Something that changes everything about how you approach these relationships. It's the final key to taking back control. And trust me, once you know it, you'll see everything differently. The next step, it's coming, and it will be the most important one yet.